Welcome to Inside AI, a podcast from the EPFL AI Center. I'm your host, Marcel Salathé, professor and co-director of the EPFL AI Center. Each episode brings you fascinating discussions with brilliant minds from EPFL and across the global AI community. From groundbreaking algorithms to ethical considerations, from technical innovations to real-world applications, we explore the technology that's transforming our world. Whether you're an AI researcher, industry professional, or simply curious about the technology that's shaping our future, join us as we venture inside AI. My guest today is Adrian Cabrera de Luis, an EPFL-trained microengineer, Harvard visiting scholar, MIT MBA, ex-BCG strategist, and now CEO of the fast-growing AI company MailMaestro. Adrian's journey is quite remarkable. He started out in microengineering at EPFL, then took the leap to MIT for his MBA, went on to Boston Consulting Group, and then caught the entrepreneurial bug. He built and sold his first company. And as soon as ChatGPT launched, he saw the writing on the wall and decided to reinvent himself once again, this time headfirst into AI with MailMaestro, which is an AI assistant for Outlook and Gmail. In this episode, we follow Adrian's path and ask questions like, is an MBA really worth it, or should you just start building? What will tomorrow's companies look like with AI? And is it actually possible that a single seed round could get an AI startup to profitability? And what does that mean for entrepreneurs and startup founders? Now, before we get started, just a quick heads up about AIMLD. The 2026 conference is coming up on February 10th to 12th at the Swiss Tech Convention Center in Lausanne. It might seem a bit early to announce it, but I wanted to mention it now for two reasons. First, so you can save the date in your calendars, but more importantly, because this is our 10th anniversary edition, we're going all in on reinventing what the conference is. You know, after 10 years of organizing AIMLD, it's clear that the world and the world of AI has changed dramatically. So for the 10th edition, we decided to tear it all down and rebuild it from scratch, asking ourselves, what would an AI conference look like if we were to create it for the very first time in 2026? And for that reason, we're also rebranding it. We'll stick to the four letters, AIMLD, but from now on, we're calling it AIMLD Intelligence Summit, because it's about way more than just machine learning. It's as much about artificial intelligence as it is about human intelligence and ingenuity, and most importantly, about how to bring the two together. I'll have to say much more about this in the coming weeks and months. So with all that, let's go to the conversation with Adrian. All right, Adrian, thanks for coming on the podcast.
Pleasure is all mine. Thank you very much for having me, Marcel.
Good. So if one goes to your LinkedIn page, one of the pages, many pages that exist about you, and scrolls all the way back, your educational journey starts at EPFL.
That's right.
And then there's many other things, and then a long list of things you've done outside of the educational system. So for people to get a bit of an idea of who you are and what your journey is that leads you to today, can you just explain that a bit?
Yeah, definitely. So as you very well mentioned, I started my career at EPFL. I studied microtechnique, which I think is it's a very unique career to EPFL and like Switzerland in general. And so it's kind of like this mix of, I think it was built for the watch industry initially, but then it evolved very quickly and took more robotics and other things, right? And so it's one of those careers where you get to study electronics, mechanical engineering, and computer science in a quite diverse way. So I really, really liked it. I did that for quite a few years here. I had an amazing education. It was very tough, to be honest, but it was very rewarding at the end. I got the opportunity to do my master's thesis at Harvard, which was great. I think that really opened up a bit my way of looking at academia, just looking at like how other people were doing science, and also how different countries and different cultures actually looked about like academia and how to build stuff. And so did my bachelor's, my master's, and at that point in time, I was actually considering doing a PhD or not. I did have a few offers at EPFL, also discussions in the US. But in the end, I felt I really wanted to get a bit more practical. And funnily enough, I felt, oh, I know how to build a product. Now I just need to like figure out how do you commercialize it. And I went to do management consulting because I felt like that's where I was going to learn all the business skills that I did not get as an engineer. I joined BCG, and it was very different than what I actually expected, but it was an amazing school. I think BCG is great at like attracting top talent from top universities in the world. They put them to work on extremely challenging cases, and you really develop quite a lot of skills. I would say not only how to feel comfortable in a very high executive like setting, right? So like I was presenting on like to boards of publicly listed companies within like 3 or 4 months in the job, but also how do you navigate very complex problems? How do you like navigate organizations and so on? So just very thorough overview of everything, and also exposure to a bunch of different industries. So it was great in terms of getting a really good understanding of like how different companies do work.
So just to interject here, I know there's much more to come, but this is very interesting because now that type of industry, right, Boston Consulting Group and so on, is under a lot of pressure from AI. And would that still be possible? And how is everything changing? And how do you look at this field now? Because there seems to be this sort of, I don't know if it's an arrogant view, right, from many in the AI field that are sort of looking at this as a dying field. Is that actually true? Maybe we can talk about that, but let's maybe just first but it's something I find super interesting.
It is very interesting. And I would say like ChatGPT or Claude are much better as analysts than I was back in the day, right? I think they're much faster than I am. They're much more eloquent than I am in like providing ideas and so on. So I do think that for sure the entry-level jobs at these companies will be done to a very large extent with AI is my take. However, there is a whole other part, which is like just the stakeholder management, right? And like putting in the big picture, because the organizations you're working with are huge organizations, right? And you're very often like working with different countries and having to get all of the different input and driving those workshops and so on. And so I still believe there is probably a need for such an interface of someone that is then coordinating and getting and running the analysis to be done. However, is the size of that market becoming smaller? Probably. Will they have to reinvent themselves heavily? Definitely. But in my current company at Maestro Labs, we also see that large enterprises are the ones that are struggling the most to incorporate AI into their business processes overall, right? And they actually need quite a lot of guidance because they're paralyzed. We're at the point in time where innovation is happening at such a quick pace, right? Like 2 months later, whatever you looked at was completely off, right? And these management teams don't get to meet that often. And so by the time that you have the next meeting, like they might be still discussing GPT 3.5 or GPT 4, right? And we've moved towards so many different types of AIs, and the use cases just keep on becoming bigger and bigger or more impressive. So I think they will need someone to help them navigate this transition. And then I think the implementation firms are going to do really, really well, right? So there's this very funny stat, which is for every dollar that Salesforce made, Accenture made $7, because it's quite a lot about like the change management and configuration of all these tools. And so I think probably Deloitte and Accenture are also making quite a lot of money out of every single dollar that OpenAI or Claude makes. They're driving the organizational transformation. They're building the wrappers that are specific to those companies and that work with their internal systems. So I think there's a good like 5 to 10 years where these companies are still going to be
we don't have to worry about them in the short term.
No. They've also done really well for themselves, so they'll be fine. Very smart people there as well.
But it's also interesting. So you said you learned a lot at that time. Is that still something you sort of take value from after all these years now running, yes, Maestro Lab as a CEO?
Definitely. I think the hard work ethic that you learn at those firms is just unprecedented, and it's very hard, right? So you're working 8 to 1 a.m. very often. It doesn't sound sexy, but like it builds this kind of like rigor and push. The fact that you need to be managing logistics of like, hey, Monday I'll be in London, Wednesday I need to be in Poland. How do you manage all of these things? that's definitely super worth it. And then there's a lot of stuff that's just pattern recognition, right? Like it doesn't matter how many times you've read something on a book or you've heard a podcast, until you haven't done it yourself, the learning doesn't come through. And that's actually something overall that I'm quite interested slash I don't really know how to think about it, is, for example, coding, right? Like I learned to code here at EPFL. The only way to learn how to code is like typing it yourself, making the mistake, debugging, and like debugging is the way how you learn coding, right? Like you can look at all of the YouTube tutorials, unless you're like debugging and you're like, oh, I forgot a semicolon here, then you're not making it. And I'm kind of worried for like this next generation, right? Where they don't have to debug because Cursor or Claude, like all of these AIs are like debugging it for them. So the way, will they think about learning? How does that learning really engrave? Is something that I don't know. Actually, I would love to hear your thoughts, because I'm sure you've also been thinking a bit about this as well.
Yeah, well, I mean, we also have to, in a sense, right? Because it's our bread and butter. But yeah, I mean, I guess just to be brief, I would say, I mean, my hunch is it'll just be a sort of next level sort of debugging, right? Where at least for the vast majority of activities, I still think, right, there's going to be sort of hard basics which you will have to learn the hard way, just even right in computer science, just the same way there is no vibe physics and vibe math, right? You will just have to do it, and you will have to get it right, because right, that one mistake that you will make, right, just kills everything in your application or your calculation. I think it's going to be somewhat similar with a lot of programming. But then, of course, there's going to be a lot of programming in English also, right? And then the debugging will just be different, because all these tools will make some subtle mistakes that are actually hard to catch, and you have to figure it out yourself. So I guess the whole thing will just shift, right, in the sort of arms race kind of Red Queen dynamics. But who knows, right? Hard to say.
Yeah. So definitely, I think looking back, I'm very happy I gained those skills at that point in time.
Yeah.
I don't know if the new generation will be getting those skills. They will be getting very different skills, as you very well mentioned. But I'm happy with those skills. Yeah. I'm happy with the network it gave me as well. Like my current company, many of my investors do come from my time at BCG, and they're very helpful as well, right? Like introducing me to clients. They're very well connected, and so it's definitely it was definitely worth it at the time.
Okay. Yeah. That's super interesting. We had so many conversations here, and if you're sort of closer to, well, if you're close to the sort of startup and what I call YC type of philosophy, right? This like all of this doesn't exist basically, right? You study, that's still very important because you need the basics somewhere, and then
it depends,
you just go,
right? If you ask Peter Thiel, it's like it's worse. It's not worth your study, right? You should just drop out, and that's
or take one of his fellowships. That's true. That's Peter Thiel, but I think he's still a bit of an outlier, though. One who tends to be right many times. So definitely not something to ignore. But if you talk to most of the YC people and you sort of read a bit what Paul Graham says and so on, I mean, I think this notion that you still need a strong basis, and you actually need to be every big startup at the end of the day starts as something niche is one of the core theories also, right? And so you need to be interested in something that's very niche, and the best way to do that, and the other is at a university. And another good thing at a university is that you're surrounded by smart people, which later are going to be also part of the network. So I'm not saying there is not any other way, but that's sort of their thinking. And then they say, okay, and then, right, but then you basically immediately go and start building, right? Don't waste time with things like MBAs or business consulting. But you're a counter example to that, which is great. Right?
Yeah, I mean, I think both ways work, and I think YC does have a point, right, where I had to unlearn a lot of the things that I had learned, right? Because at these consulting companies and the MBAs, you're very often like gathering ideas, making analysis, and then your output is a PowerPoint that you're presenting to someone so that they can execute, right? But as a startup, you just shortcut all of that, and you go from, okay, this is my gut feeling, let's get some data to validate it, let's build it, right? And there's no presentations, there's no additional stuff, there's no communications. It's how well do you execute and how fast can you ship? And so it did take me a bit of time to get to that. And now, for example, we don't do presentation like PowerPoints at Maestro Labs at all, right? Everything is like a Slack message that's very well thought through. Sometimes if it's much bigger, we'll make a Notion page, but it will be a 1 to 2 page document max. Most of the time it's just screen sharing and like having a live discussion and like double clicking on the analytics to decide what's going to happen. But we don't take time anymore to, okay, let me prepare a presentation for this meeting. That doesn't happen anymore.
And why is that? So, I mean, I'm glad to hear it. I'm not a big fan of presentations myself, but is it because you think one needs to think more clearly when putting things into writing, other than just on slides you can sort of hide a lot of sloppy thinking? Or is it also because the information is now more accessible to perhaps internal AIs?
Yeah. I think it's a bit of both,
Okay.
right? I think also whenever you're using ChatGPT or Claude or something to like write something, you can discuss with it and you can get a much better, let's say, final document that way. That definitely helps. And with PowerPoints, as you mentioned, right, like you can just put on like a few images and let people think, like fill in the holes. Writing definitely pushes you to cover all of the different things. That's for sure a part of it. But I think also it's the time it takes. PowerPoints take a lot of time, right? Like just putting the boxes that they look nicely, changing the colors, adding the icons is something where I spent like literally probably every night for 3 years between 10 p.m. and 1 a.m. was just that. And I see zero value to that. And we really think about how quickly can we ship. It's extremely important for us, right? We need to ship the right thing. And that's why we still do the analysis. That's why we still have the discussions. That's why we still like will write down what is it that we're trying to do. But we want to get to shipping as fast as possible. And I think AI is also allowing us to do that, right? So for example, before we would write, requirement docs for the tech team to be able to implement a feature, right? Now we're moving towards, hey, let me prototype this on Cursor. It's going to be to me like 3 or 4 hours. And let's see if it works, right? Let's launch it internally. Let's see if people are using it or not. What's the things they like or not. And you can just make all of these micro changements to the product that every micro changement would take you like 2 weeks or a month for like an engineer to do normally. But now we can just test them, right? And we have a much better idea of what the final product should look like before it has ever like gone anywhere. And there's so much value in having people interact with a prototype rather than interact with a PowerPoint or even interact with a well-drafted doc, because then you really get a bit of a feeling of what did the person have in mind when they were like discussing here, like what's their vision, how is it coming through to reality, and the way the ideas flow from there is extremely interesting as well.
Mm-hmm. But you prototype this mostly internally, or do you then also ship those?
Yeah, so I would say until a month ago, we only prototyped them internally, right? It's so, for example, like we're very big now on voice. Like how will voice and emails come together, right? And there's different experiences, right? So I could say, okay, tell Marcel, a bit like how I would speak to ChatGPT, right? Giving instructions. Tell Marcel, I would love to do a podcast with him next week, Monday and Tuesday I'm available, right? That's one way. But like, is that going to be the natural thing? Or will people rather go, hi, Marcel, how about we do the podcast next week at 2 p.m., right? And so just creating a small prototype, shipping it to the team and seeing how every one of them use it, then gives you really good understanding of, hey, should we go for this option? Should we go for this other option? Or do we need to make something that works for both? And prior to this, it would have taken us months to develop, like launch it, try to get some beta users, only then getting the feedback. And then you would go back and like have to rewrite everything, right? And so now we're like accelerating all of that, but it's in a matter, like the prototypes are built in a matter of hours, right? And then the usage is a matter of days. And so in less than a week, you already have a really good, like, I think you get to validate your gut feeling much faster than you ever did before.
And you would say the key contributor to that are tools like Cursor?
Yeah, we use Cursor a lot. I mean, we experiment with all of them, right? Windsurf, and I mean, every single day I feel like another one is making a breakthrough. So we're not very loyal to any of them. We always look for whatever is the best AI out there, and we'll try to adopt that one, I would say.
Okay. All right, so let's close the many parentheses and we go back to your journey. And we were at BCG. So what happened then?
BCG. So it was very lucky that they decided to sponsor my MBA, and so I did an MBA. So the second thing that YC tells you not to do, or the Valley in general. And so I did an MBA at MIT, and that was a magical place. It was just super interesting in the sense that they bring amazing speakers, very inspirational people, like all the time, right? And so you get this exposure. You also get to see what the different labs are doing, like the media lab and all of these different labs are just building amazing stuff. So you're constantly being challenged to like think what the future is going to look like. Let's say so that was something that was very interesting. Second is, I would say a third of my class wanted to be entrepreneurs. Right. And that's something I didn't see at EPFL, right? EPFL was very focused on like, hey, I want to get a job at Rolex. I want to get a job at Logitech, great firms. I love all of their products. But over there, everyone wanted to be an entrepreneur, right? So our MBA class was 400 people. I think it was 135 people were doing the entrepreneurship track. So I think that just like every single lunch you would have was like talking about your idea or like, hey, I just figured this out. How are you thinking about like trademarks? Should you be thinking about trademarks? Do you have an accountant? Are you doing an LLC? Are you doing a C Corp? Is it Delaware or not, right? And so you just accelerated all of this learning just through the experiences of your peers rather than having to do it sequentially, right? Which I think is very similar to what you would get on a YC badge and so on. But I think being in an ecosystem that supports entrepreneurship just increases your chances of success significantly rather than you deciding by yourself of saying like, hey, I want to become an entrepreneur. I have an idea. It's super, super hard, right? So if you can at least learn from other entrepreneurs, the mistakes they're making, because we're all going through a lot of the same challenges, right? We're all hiring for the first time. We're all like having to register for sales taxes for the same time. We're all, so you at least get all of these data points that really help you shape your decisions and your vision and so on. So I did get that at MIT. And contrary to what a lot of the VCs say, a lot of the VCs spent their time at MIT talking to us. And so I was lucky enough that during my first year, Chris Sheppy, one of the co-founders of Lightspeed, he actually really liked what we were working on. And he said like, hey, come and spend the summer at Lightspeed. We'll figure out whether what you're building is worth it or not, but I think it's worth it for you to spend the summer and do this. And so they had a program. I think they only selected 6 or 7 teams from different universities. So it was like Stanford, Harvard, MIT, Wharton, like the typical ones, and one team representing each school. And so we all flew to Palo Alto. We all lived in Palo Alto for 3 months, and we were building, and we had like meetings with all of the different partners at Lightspeed, and they were all very interesting, right? Because they would all bring a different perspective, right? Some of them would be like super focused around distribution, right? Like distribution, all that matters. Some others would be like, okay, how do you do enterprise sales? And so it was just super interesting to like get all of their different perspectives on your company. Second is they did an amazing job at like bringing in super like amazing speakers, right? So we got to meet like the founders of Rubrik, one of like the fastest companies ever on the B2B space. We met Max Lefkin at Affirm. We met Selena Tobacco-Lawa from SurveyMonkey, just like all of these super big personalities, right? And we were, I don't know, maybe like 15, 16 people in the room getting to talk to them. We met John Thompson, the chairman of Microsoft, who then became an investor. So it's just like an amazing place, I would say, right? Yeah, so they came all the way there. We did the summer with them. They liked what we built. And so they decided to lead our seed round by the end of the summer.
But this was not Maestro Labs, right?
No.
Notably, this was another company.
That's right.
And what was that company building?
So the company was called Alpaca. What we did is we noticed that a lot of different people were looking for apartments on Facebook groups rather than on your traditional apartment listing sites. And so that was kind of like hey, like the market is shifting. The new generation is spending more time on social media than going to these places. Is there something here? And so we literally built AI and bots to automatically create these Facebook groups all around the world. So it'd be like apartments in San Francisco, 2 bedrooms in New York. And we had thousands of groups. They were all managed automatically. And it grew super quickly. So we had like over 13 million users searching for apartments on these Facebook groups. And we spent $0 in marketing. So we became super obsessed on like, hey, how do you get this distribution like advantage, and how do you build these network effects of you need to like manage both the supply side, right? Of like, hey, I'm a landlord, I want to put my apartment to rent, and the demand side of like, hey, I'm looking for an apartment. So yeah, we ran that for, I would say, 4.5 years or so. And then we ended up selling it to a fintech company called Boom. And it was a super interesting move. I mean, also like selling a company is super hard, right? And I had been at BCG doing vendor due diligences. I had taken the M&A class at MIT, and it still doesn't prepare you at all for this. The best thing I had was introductions to founders that had sold their company in the last 6 months. And that's where I got the real advice, right? Which was like, Adrian, this is what's going to happen, right? Like, this is how you need to manage the process. Get your data room ready, make sure that you sign the NDAs, try to drive for LOIs around this type of like timeline. If they're taking much longer, it's not a good sign.
Why was that? Was it just that those classes that you had at the time were just hopefully outdated, or
They were
was it
too
just
academic.
too academic?
Yes.
Even at MIT.
Even at MIT, yes. And they were great classes, right? But it's okay, like how do you look at the cash flows of these deals? How do you think about like the synergies and so on? But in reality, it's like selling a company is mostly about trust, right? It's the buyer trusting the acquiring, like the seller, that what they've built is actually worth what they're like saying, and that they'll stay around and help them build it to be even better or to be well integrated within the platform. Yeah. Right? Because in the end, it's all about people, right? And if
there's
the
some dead bodies in the basement.
That's right. And it doesn't matter like how much money you spend on lawyers, etc. Like in due diligence, it's very hard to find that, and everyone feels it's very stressful on all sides, right? Because the person that's buying is putting a relatively large amount of money into it. They're just hoping that it's actually going to drive the results, and the person that's selling is like hoping like, hey, this is the right home, right? And we don't get screwed over afterwards, and you get fired, and whatever they requested vesting and you get nothing, or they told you they would give you resources and then you don't have it, and you're stuck for 4 years because you have golden handcuffs. And so it's really a lot more about trust and how do you make this, and being as informed as you can of, hey, is this like a very large company that has acquired a lot of different companies, and how does it behave? Or is this like a Series B, Series C company that's like it's their first acquisition, and what are the expectations and so on. So I would say all of that I only learned through other founders. And I think the great thing about like the founder community is they're super accessible, right? Like even myself, if you like write me an email on LinkedIn, like a cold message on LinkedIn, like I'll take 15 minutes and like try to help you out, right? Even if you're more connected to me, even easier, right? You're like, hey, you're an EPFL alum, you're an MIT alum, like I will for sure give back to the community because it's given a lot to me. So I would say for like any entrepreneurs that are hearing this, like you literally should be reaching out to all of these people because they're all super happy to help you because they've been through it, right? And like they suffered it and they're super happy to
but help you so that's maybe something we can talk about so later. But in terms of that network, do you reach out? I mean, there has to be some connection, or you just randomly say, hey, I'm this entrepreneur, or is there some connection for you in terms of MIT or BCG? Or
having the connection makes the introduction easier for sure, right? But I would say as an entrepreneur, like that cannot stop you. You like most of my day is just reaching out to people I've never met before and asking for favors, right? Whether it's, hey, let's do a partnership together, or whether it's like, hey, leave your very well-paying job at Google and come and join my company. And a lot of these people don't know me. The network helps a lot in two ways. Sometimes if you're directly connected, right? Like I reached out to you over LinkedIn cold, right? And it's like, hey, I was at EPFL. And I just hoped that was going to be enough, right? I'm very thankful that you reached out. But that was all of the connection that we had. I probably would have still reached out even if I wasn't at EPFL, and I would have found an angle, right? It's like, so it doesn't stop you. It just makes it a lot easier. And the second thing is, then your network has second degree connections to the people that you want to meet. And that's super powerful, right? Because then I can be like, hey, Marcel, I saw you're connected to Ed Bunyak. Yeah. Would you mind making an intro, right? And I mean, you're very kind and decided to make it. And so then I know Ed, right? And you kind of expand your network. And I think that's something that's quite culturally different between Switzerland and the US, at least, where people in the US are super happy to make these introductions all the time, right?
Yeah.
Like they'll do a little bit of vetting, but overall, like they will make the introduction. In Switzerland, they kind of feel guilty of
Responsible, right?
responsible of like, hey, I'm introducing you to this person. They need to be really good. And I think it's just very hard for you to be the judge,
Yeah.
right? Because there's a lot of, I don't know, even friends at MIT, which I feel like this company's going nowhere, right? And then KKR invests 70 million or,
Yeah.
I mean, actually that company was pretty good, but there are a lot of people that you just did not expect and end up being extremely successful.
Yeah.
And you just don't know how those two people are going to be connected because they might see things that you're not seeing. And so I think that's something that I really think works really well in the US and like startup community overall, which is everyone's making each other favors. They're not necessarily looking for anything back.
Yeah. And do you find that gets harder now? I mean, for example, when you said that you always respond, I felt, that tinge of guilt because on certain channels I am almost completely non-responsive, but just because the load, right, of messages almost seems to have increased exponentially. And I guess it's also much easier now to reach out. And then there's probably a certain amount of automation.
Yeah.
So
if it's automated, I don't respond.
Yeah.
Right. Like
but
it needs to come
increasingly hard to tell also, right?
increasingly hard to tell, but still, right? Like there's always like one line or 5 words that I'm like, okay, he listened to my podcast, right? He liked my episode with someone. Like there is a reason why they're coming to. So it's like, that's something I can manage at my scale. At your scale, Marcel, like something I saw from my master's thesis professor at Harvard, she actually started empowering her PhDs, right? Saying, hey, I would love to take the time with you. Unfortunately, I can't. However, this PhD is the right person for you to do it, right? And so she started delegating some of those discussions. And I felt it was amazing, right? Because all of a sudden she was really bringing up all of her PhDs to a next level where they're now acting as mentors. Sometimes she would join the call as well, but she was really thinking about like, how do I make this scalable rather than my time is, limited and this is as much as I can do.
Yeah. All right. So again, a bunch of parentheses closing here. So let's go back to you are selling your company, right?
Yes.
What happens then?
Yeah. So we sold it. I stayed with them for almost a year. It was a very interesting experience.
This was when, by the way?
This was 2022.
Okay. So recently.
Very recently. Yeah. And so I think like one of the things is I got to see an amazing founder run a company. And I learned so much from him, like the hustle, like the networking. Like he was even better, right? Like he'd be like, "Hey, I'm trying to hire a product manager in Texas. This is a LinkedIn shortcut that's going to show you what are all of the product managers that you have a connection in Texas. If there's anyone you like, please send them my way." Right. And same thing when he was trying to break into like big accounts and like, hey, we're trying to break into this company. These are the 4 people we're currently talking to. Is there anyone else you know at this company that might be an influencer and so on? Right. And so like just like his way of leveraging his network to like push forward his company was super, super impressive. So I did learn a lot from him. But then as well, it was hard to remain motivated once you sold your company because the mission changes completely. Yeah, it wasn't as easy as I thought. And I really did give it my best, I would say, for a while. And then like life reasons, I had to move. And so that's kind of like we broke through. But like I probably still have calls with that founder every 3 months or so because we encounter like similar problems, right? Which is, hey, I'm trying to do this thing or I'm trying to open an office here. Like I know you remember you did it. How did you do it? Right. So yeah, I think that was very, very good. Yeah. And so then I also like took some time to like travel and I did a lot of kite surfing, a lot of scuba diving, recharge and enjoy a bit like the time post sale. Yeah, and then ChatGPT came along and I went back to building because I felt like, and I really do feel like this is probably the most disruptive technology I will see in my lifetime. And I had to go back and build.
You were taking a break at the time.
Yeah.
And
so I was taking a break. We were moving to Asia because my wife is originally from Asia. And we're like, okay, let's build our next chapter over there. I was interviewing with VCs. I was like exploring the startup ecosystem there. I was interviewing as well with like the large companies such as Meta, Google, and so on.
Where was that in Asia?
Singapore.
In Singapore.
Yeah, amazing place, by the way. And I was about to start working at a VC when ChatGPT came along. And we had already worked with OpenAI in my old company when it was GPT-2. So we actually, we did a lot of AI and NLP and all of this type of stuff. And we did see we thought there's definitely a lot of potential. It was just not production ready, right?
Yeah.
And I think ChatGPT or GPT 3.5 was the moment where this is production ready, not for all of the use cases, but there's specific use cases that are production ready.
Well,
And
especially
so,
GPT-2 was a world of difference, right?
Yeah.
GPT-3 started getting, you could sort of
GPT-3
see where it was potentially heading.
Yes, exactly. And it was also it used to be completion rather than a chat, right? Which made a huge difference in the user experience and so on. So I remember ChatGPT came, I saw the tweet from Sam Altman and I started playing with it. And for me, it was the world is not the same, right? I didn't sleep for probably 48 hours. I went on this rabbit hole of just testing every single thing, where did it work, where it didn't. Tried DALL-E, tried Midjourney, all of these different things. And pretty much my analysis was, I think text to text is ready. This was end of 2022, right? The rest is coming, but it's not ready yet. And so then it was a bit around just reaching out to my old boss at BCG, reaching out to my old investors and so on. I was okay, what type of things should I build? Do you have any ideas? And we landed on email relatively quickly just because everyone writes emails, a very big time suck. It was very easy to build the business case. And so then I built a prototype myself. It was a plugin for Gmail that helped you respond to emails. And I did that probably also in 48 hours just by myself. And I recorded a Loom video. I sent it to all my old investors. I said I don't know if there's something here or not. Would love to jump on a call and hear your thoughts. And they were super supportive. And I think as a founder, being a second-time founder and having your original investors back you again just gives you a lot of confidence. And also it's the way that they give you the confidence, right? So again, I remember Chris Sheppy told me I don't know if this is going anywhere, but let me give you a few $100K and we'll figure it out together. Yeah. And this was it was between Christmas and New Year, right? So everyone's supposed to be on this relaxed time, and they were all jumping on calls with me, and we built a team of 6 different people working on this. 3 of them were coming from my first startup, and that was also great for me, just feeling, hey, these people are willing to give me another chance. And I also knew how good they were, right? And we had already worked together. So we were just so fast. So we were super fast. So we literally, I think it was in less than 2 weeks, we had created a company, incorporated a company. We had pitches with clients. We have more than a prototype. We had a production ready product, and we started selling super, super quickly.
So that was Maestro Labs already?
This was Maestro Labs. Okay. Yeah. And so we started with MailMaestro being an email plugin. We started on Gmail. And I think this was one of our super interesting decisions very early on, right? Which is, if you look at the Valley, it's everyone builds on Gmail integrations with Slack and Notion and Zoom. And it's a very kind of cool tech stack. And because of my time at BCG and so on, I knew that all of the larger companies were not on Gmail, they were not on Slack, they were not on Notion, right? And so I always say my customer persona ended up being someone with khakis and a shirt, and then they have an HP computer and it's not a Mac, and their text
from the ads.
Exactly
the other guy from
the Mac PC ads, right? Yeah. And their tech stack is Word, Outlook, Teams, PowerPoint, Excel,
Microsoft basically.
That's it. It's a Microsoft 365. That is their whole tech stack. So we decided very quickly to say okay, we're going to stop building for Gmail. We're going to move to Outlook. And my employees were not happy. They're like, Adrian, no, can we keep our Gmail addresses at least? Okay. And so we started building for Outlook, and we love it because it's a platform that's very hard to build on compared to Gmail.
Technically, you mean?
Yes, there's a lot less documentation. There's a lot of less people building stuff. It's much closer ecosystem. It's not as well thought through.
It wasn't built for integrations.
I mean, they had an integration thing, but it was never the core thing, right? So if you're a cool team at Microsoft, you're not building the integrations for the Microsoft 365 team. Anyone that's hearing from this at Microsoft, I'm really sorry. I really appreciate your partnership, and we love building on top of you guys. But yeah, compared to the Notions, the Slack, the Googles, right? The API ecosystem and the platform ecosystem was not as developed. So it ended up building up a moat for us, which is no one wants to build for Microsoft, or not the cool people in Silicon Valley. And so we just kept on building and building and building. We started growing very quickly. Then we said, okay, let's launch a second product because the email product's working really well, but we keep on getting requests of like, hey, can this work on Teams? And I'm doing all of these calls and I want to be able to also use AI for my calls. So we said, okay, well, let's launch a second product, an AI note taker for Teams. And there are a lot of AI note takers there, right? There's amazing companies like Fireflies, Otter, Read AI that have raised tons more money than we have. But we just decided to dedicate ourselves to Microsoft ecosystem and understand the persona and the user pain points that they had. And that's why we're now the fastest growing AI note taker on Microsoft Teams worldwide. There's over 2,500 apps for Microsoft Teams. We're number one. We're in front of Dropbox. We're in front of Workday, Slack, Salesforce, HubSpot, like companies that we've always looked up to, but we just decided to really, really focus on the Microsoft ecosystem and build the best product there. So yeah, so we now have MailMaestro, which is the number 3 product for Outlook, and TeamsMaestro, which is the number 1 product for Microsoft Teams worldwide. And we just love the platform, right? And the idea is we're going to keep on building new products around the Microsoft ecosystem with an AI focus first and closing the gap that Microsoft currently doesn't have or has not built from an AI native perspective.
And are you worried about like dependencies and cluster risk? I mean, I just know it a bit from the Apple world, right? Where there are all these stories of great companies doing some Mac, or iPhone applications and then basically dying overnight because Apple launches something on their own.
I mean, there's definitely a risk, right? Microsoft has all of the resources in the world. What they don't have is the speed that we have, right? And the capability to innovate at the speed that we are. So I would say they recently announced like a slight change to their Copilot thing. We had built that 20 months ago, right? So we're always going to have a 20-month lead time, and we're probably it's just going to increase, right? Because the speed at which we're delivering stuff is faster and faster, and like their lead time's not getting any closer. It's very hard for them, right? It's like a lot of different teams. It's unclear who manages what. Even if you ask someone at Microsoft, like, hey, who would be dealing this? They spend all of their time networking internally to figure out who's the owner of the thing. They have a ton of complexity internally, which we don't, right? We have some limitations, right? In terms of what we can build is what's available on like their platform SDK, but we can get very creative what we can do there, and you can actually get quite a lot of it done. So I would say I'm not super worried in that sense. There's always space for a few players, right? And like they might have a really good product. They have an amazing distribution. It's very hard to compete with them on a distribution perspective. But I mean, we're going to keep on winning market share little by little. And also it's an interesting thing, right? Because Microsoft is a huge company. So I would say probably the Copilot team is not super keen on what we're doing. However, the Microsoft Azure team is super happy, right? Because we're spending a lot of money on their cloud and they're very supportive of what we're building. Additionally, the, let's say, Microsoft 365 extension team or like the plugin team, they're also super happy because we're building use cases that are super impressive, right? And so then they can go and talk to the HubSpots, to the Zeros of this world and saying like, look what this company is doing, right? Like imagine the possibilities of what you can do if you integrate even further with our platform. And it just makes their platform stickier and stickier, which is what they want, right? So we are adding a ton of value to that ecosystem. And it's interesting, right? It's like Salesforce is a competitor to Microsoft, right? Like Microsoft has Microsoft Dynamics as a CRM. And yet they're probably like one of Microsoft's biggest clients. And it's a very interesting co-opetition model. And that's something that we're navigating at the time.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what's also interesting, I mean, you mentioned before you raised some seed funding in the beginning.
Yes.
But you haven't raised since then, at least you haven't announced it. So I assume you actually haven't.
We haven't. And I think this is what AI is allowing you to do now that you were not able to do 3 years ago, right? Which is like we're now cash flow positive and profitable. So it gets to the point where I don't really need money, right? It's not like I'm burning money and I need to keep on raising so that I get another 18 months of runway and scaling up the team. It's like we're already growing super quickly. I'm making more money month over month. We grew over 40, I think like 35% compared to last month. It's amazing numbers, right? We probably will grow like 6x in a year and we don't need the money anymore. Right. We also are becoming leaner and leaner in the team. We really look at how do we use AI to remove our bottlenecks significantly, right? So whether it's in customer support, like how can we make them more efficient? Can we like pre-draft the responses based on all of the knowledge that we have and so on? On the engineering side, it's okay, how can we use Cursor or all of these AI tools to start developing faster and so on, right? Like every single person in the team is encouraged to use AI, right? And what's super interesting as well is when I talk to like these large enterprises or incumbents, very often they tell us like, oh, so for example, Copilot, right? It's like $30 a month. And they're like, oh, that's so expensive. I'm like, the productivity gains that you get are ridiculously big, right? Like you should be happy to pay $30 a month for these people because, you know, and an employee is going to cost you 10,000, right? So this is 0.003%. You're going to get the time back so quickly. So we literally spend like hundreds, if not thousands of dollars just getting as many AI tools we can to the team so that first of all, like they can build securely and safely and none of our client data is used to train any type of models. Second is so that they keep on getting exposed to what's coming next. And third is the productivity gains that we're getting, right? So we reduced the team from last year to this year by 2 people. And we still grew 5x, right? And we don't feel like we need more people to do stuff at the moment, I would say. We just keep on thinking, let's figure out what's the next bottleneck and let's look at like what type of AI do we need to build internally? Do we need to buy from a third party? But that's the way that we're building the company, I would say. And so I would say like, I think there's 2 trends that are being discussed in Silicon Valley at the moment, which is one of them is this, it's called like seed strapping. So it's not bootstrapping anymore, but it's like, hey, you raised a little bit of money, but now you hit escape velocity. You don't need to raise again. Like, what is that going to look like? And second is like, are we going to be like, I think like the 1-person billion-dollar company, I still think it's hard. It might happen. There's amazing people out there, but I do believe in like the 10-person billion-dollar company. And that's more or less what we're going to be trying to do.
But do you think, I mean, this, right, from a financial perspective, listening to you, right, this all sounds fantastic and like a dream, right? You're growing the business, yet you're reducing the costs. You don't need external money. You're profitable, cash flow positive. But like to some extent, textbook economics would predict you will be getting attacked for that, right, by competitors because it's such a lucrative thing. And how do you think about this? You think that this is just going to go on like this, or maybe, you know, incumbents will come in, but then you're already 1 year ahead onto the next thing? Like what's the dynamics? I mean, do you imagine this will just go on forever like this, or what's your...
Yeah, it's a very good question, right? I think that, so on one side is like, okay, before you would get a lot more money and like, what would you get that, right? It was either you could get more engineering people or more distribution, right? So I'd say on the engineering side, I don't think you need it anymore, right? Because I think at the moment, like we're shipping so fast that I would say our customers could not ingest like us shipping 1 or 2 features a day, right? Like that would be too much for them. Like they just get overwhelmed and, you know, like at some point, like you build too much complexity within a product. So I think like we're already seeing that. So we do not need to grow the engineering team. Before you used to, because it would take you 2 months to launch a feature, right? And so if you had more resources, you could do it in 2 weeks. That's great. But by now, I don't think it really makes a difference because the problem is now education and onboarding of the users rather than anything else. And the second is distribution, right? Which is, okay, how do you get as many people to know about this? And there, yes, you can definitely spend money super inefficiently, right? But what we're hearing very often is, like, Facebook ads are not performing very well anymore, right? It gets really, really hard to actually make them economically work. Second is, we think we have identified, at least for our persona, the places where they spend the most time, right? Which is the Microsoft Marketplace, where we're currently ranking 1 and 3. It's very hard for anyone to like all of a sudden rank so high because we've been building this for a while. And it is really our secret red sauce on how well do you rank here and how do you build the viral effects. So I would say that's it, right? And we're in a niche, right? And there's so many things to be built at the moment. Like I would have 10 other ideas on what to build right now that could probably be bigger than what we're building at the moment. But that's how we see it, right? Like that's a marketplace. Second is we're ranking very high on Google as well. So like we did put quite a lot of efforts on SEO. We did an acquisition. So we did acquire a company about, I think October last year, which was amazing in SEO. Right. And all of a sudden, like we have their SEO. So we have a stronger SEO than Superhuman, for example, who had been around for like 7 or 8 years. And we've done it with, and they raised over 100 times more money than we have. So I would say it's just knowing where to focus and doing it. Yeah. They could raise a lot more money. But then I would say a lot of VCs are still probably like debating on whether, hey, Google and Microsoft are going to win this space. Like, I don't know if we want to be like bet against them. And then there will be a few that will bet, but that's okay. Like, I always make this claim. So Zoom, I think, is the third or fourth biggest meeting provider, right? But right now they still have a $20 billion valuation. And I still think the email space is bigger than the meeting space. So I'm fine, even if I need to be number 3 or 4.
You're fine at Zoom.
Exactly. I'm fine at Zoom level, even 10 times smaller. I'd be happy as well.
So this term that you mentioned, seed strapping.
Yeah.
That's interesting. And I guess that will then also change sort of investor dynamics, because
Definitely.
if that becomes more of a thing, it pays for investors to go in even earlier, because there might not be a second chance.
I think that's right. Yeah. I think it's changing the game significantly, right? And there are,
which is great for founders, right?
Which is great for founders. I mean, I think this is the best time in the world if you have a bit of a technical knowledge to be a founder, right? Because so many things are now possible that were not possible 2 years ago, and it's so cheap to do it, right? First of all, like Microsoft, AWS, Google, like they're going to give you grants so that you can build on top of them. They give you credits, right? So you don't have that super strong startup cost initially, or that capex. And yeah, you can start building, right? It's distribution as well, where you can do it by yourself. If you get like a few viral TikToks, you like keep on posting every single time on LinkedIn, you're like are consistent on Twitter and so on. Like you can build these things yourself, right? So I think we're at an point in time where it's not only Gen AI, but so many of these technologies have allowed for the democratization of ideas to really bubble up, where it's not super expensive to build. Everyone gets a voice to get their product to be heard, and so on, right? So I think that makes a lot of sense. There are some businesses that are still going to need VC money, right? If you're building stuff for satellites, if you're building hard tech or bio stuff, it requires a lot of money even today. But I would say for SaaS and consumer apps, unless you need a lot of money for marketing or you need a very big engineering team, I really don't. I think you can get much further out and probably have less rounds, because it's possible that we need more money, right? At some point, like there might be an opportunity to buy a very big like competitor or someone that's on the side that would bring a lot of synergies, and we might want to make that acquisition and we'll need money, right? So I would never say no, and we're still super friendly with VCs, but I think the cadence has changed and the metrics have changed at the moment.
And so you said before, okay, with a bit of technical skill. So what would you see as sort of a minimum requirement for someone to start a company like that?
Yeah, it's hard to say, right? I think the problem is like if you don't have any technical skills, like, yeah, you can build something on Lovable and put it out there, but your database might be exposed. We've seen it a few times. Like there was T-App not too long ago where all of a sudden like all of the user data was exposed and so on. And so I think it still requires a bit of knowledge. So I'd say if you were already like an existing full stack engineer, this is your golden time, right? Because you can review the code. You don't need to write it, and you can be super, super fast on it. I think it's going to get better and better for people that don't know how to code. But our experience as well with AI is that it's hard to get it to do exactly what you want, right? Like it can get close enough, but sometimes, you still need to go and like change a few lines of codes here and there, or
But do you think that's a temporary thing? I mean, in defense of Lovable, not that they need a defense, but wouldn't it be a safe assumption to say, okay, I mean, these security holes, right, as terrible as they can be, and we've seen some cases in the past few weeks, they may just be a temporary sort of a childhood disease of AI that still makes these catastrophic mistakes. But as time goes on, with the same argument that you say eventually, right, a self-driving car will be much safer than a human-driven car. So an AI created software will have less security holes than a human created one.
Yes. I mean, I think all of these companies have been just evolving so quickly that I would not put it past them. I think like the question is right now, right? Like a year from now, the question is very different. But I think today you still need to understand it a little bit. The risk is too high otherwise, because at some point, like you want to be able to collect credit card data, and it does get like tricky very quickly, I would say.
Yeah.
But again, I think the way that we look at it internally is there's now 2 different use cases. One of them is the designer and me as a CEO, like we can prototype stuff so quickly, right? And we allow everyone to come up with an idea and they'd be like, hey, I prototyped this over the weekend. Just want to hear what you guys think. Right. And so I think like these hackathons or like the, Friday hacking days, they're now super productive, because before it was like you just have a very small idea and everyone needed to have kind of like a designer and engineer into the team in order to be able to build something. Now you can just build it by yourself, right? And it will not look on brand, the database is not secure and so on, but like everyone else can look at that and say, I think there's potential here. Let's now move it to the engineers, which are still going to use AI, but they're going to review the code that is being made. They're going to make sure that it's not bloated, right? Very often what happens right now is like it makes a call to a certain API and you're like, hey, I don't want it to do it this way. Can you do it this way? It doesn't delete the code, right? Like just creates another function. Yeah. And then you have super bloated code. So I would say like it's still super helpful to have engineers review that. But I think now, let's say the non-technical person that has a very cool idea, they can build a prototype and it's much easier for them to like then get the technical founder, right? Because I remember that at MIT and YC, that's always a discussion, right? If you're not technical, it's like you want to get a technical person to come and build with you. And it's super hard, right? Because they tend to be a little bit more risk averse. They also feel like I can do it without you, but you cannot do it without me. There's this very famous Facebook group at MIT was like, I can handle the business stuff, which was just like all the technical people saying, this is an MBA that reached out to me and wants to help me with my company. And anyways, so like the technical person always feels like they can do the business thing, but the business person cannot, right? But I think like now the business person can actually build a prototype and tell make it a lot more, I would say clear, or to the technical person, like, hey, this is what I want to build. I would love for you to help me build it.
Yeah. It's interesting how the technical skills are, on the one hand, you have all this absolutely insane dynamics, right? Of people getting, I mean, who knows, right? How much of it is true, but certainly very, very sizable offers in the dozens of millions, if not hundreds. And we're already seeing posts about $1 billion, though I find that a bit hard to believe, but who knows? Whereas there is also a kind of a developer that is worried, right, about their job because, Cursor and all of these tools make it much easier for quote unquote non-technical people to do a similar job. So this is interesting dynamics about where you stand. It's almost a kind of a Rorschach test, right, for the future of jobs.
Yeah, definitely. I think there's going to be a massive correction, right? Because I think also engineering salaries have been crazy for many years. I mean, due to Silicon Valley and FANG and all of these companies, right? But sometimes, I mean, front-end engineer, like working on, like the menu at Google doesn't need to be making 250K a year, right? So I think like the researchers are probably going to become more valuable, which is what we're seeing with Meta making these crazy offers to poach talent and have them join their AI labs. But I think there were all of these engineers coming out of these like boot camps, right? I don't know if you remember, but like in 2020 and 2021, you'd do like 6 months boot camps and all of a sudden you were an engineer. And I mean, you were good enough to like make some front end stuff, but you were not a computer scientist, right? You're not someone that had done like the 3-4 years that had to understand like optimization of algorithms and all of these complex things, but you were able to like start coding stuff in 6 months. So I think all of that's going to go through a correction. I think let's say what used to be called a 10x engineer will now be a 100x engineer using AI. And I think those are the people that, at least at Maestro Labs, we're trying to hire, right? Which is like, you were already a superstar. Now you're going to be like, you need to become a superstar at managing these AIs. And we just encourage our existing employees to use it as much as possible. And when we interview new people, it's like a very big part of it, right? Which tools have been using together. If we do a case study, like we do it together, right? It's like, okay, let's open ChatGPT, let's open Cursor. Let's build this. And then we see how they think, how they review the code, because the skill set has changed, right? And like we need to try to adapt, and it's hard. There's no playbook, there's no best practices, and you kind of like need to go and build it by yourself.
Yeah.
But it's a super exciting time to be around, for sure.
I mean, I guess part of that bootcamp dynamic at the time was also that the universities didn't produce enough talent, right? People, just because it is slow moving, because it goes deep, right? By design. Yeah. It's not rushed, but then you come out the other side with a solid education, and that's fine. But the market said we need more, and I guess that's where those boot camps sprang in. It's sort of always a bit of an open question to me. I totally see how one can argue, as you do, if I understand you correctly, that produced a sort of not quite, sort of a pseudo expert that could do something simple, but good enough for the use cases at the time, and that's now getting replaced by AI. The question to me is still like, are there then not at the same time so many new opportunities emerging left and right, and there still will not be enough engineers or researchers, however you call them, university trained, and we still need to train a lot more people through these boot camps to just get ready, ready to use the latest AI tools. That's sort of a hard prediction to make, right?
Yeah, it's hard. I think that's where ingenuity and entrepreneurship come, right? Which, I mean, my gut feeling is there will be more companies that are smaller rather than few companies that are very, very big. And so I think all of those people that did boot camps are in an amazing place to build their own companies, right? Because they have enough, like, quite decent technical knowledge. I'm not putting it down in any sort of way, and they have ideas, right? So it's and we've noticed as well, like when we hire people, there are people that are always coming up with ideas and want to move, and there's other people that just want to get told what to do, right? And I think the future is very bright for the people that have ideas, have spent a bit of time like building their technical skills. I think they can build amazing things.
All right. So maybe to wrap this up, just to go back to that moment, right? In at the end of 2022, you're sitting there, you're realizing, okay, this changes everything. What do you think? Do you think this was sort of a one-off, or is that going to be just a new normal where new capabilities will be unlocked, where we have to say, wow, this again changes everything? I mean, completely impossible to give a correct answer at this time. I'm just curious to see what you're thinking around this is, or you don't worry about it. You're like, look, I'm currently on this trajectory with this wave. It's super strong. So ask me about it in 5 years.
No, so I would say, like, I think the first thing is the window is still open at the moment, right? So it's not too late. Like, sometimes I speak with some friends and they're like, oh, I wish I would have started like 2 years ago. And I'm like, well, I'm happy I started 2 years ago, but there's still a million things you can do today. And actually, there's a lot of stuff that you could not do 2 years ago that you can do now, right? So I think the window is still open for anyone that wants to build. A second is, I think there's been not only one, I think we tend to say Gen AI is just like one thing, but I think the amount of like technology that have leaped forward are many, right? I mean, the text LLM stuff is impressive. The multimodal stuff is also super impressive, right? The speech to text, like how good are these models now at like transcribing what you're saying, is also very recent. All of the video stuff. And so I would say we tend to put them all under Gen AI, but they're all very different technologies. Yeah. I would say, I think it's not super fair to all of them. And so, yeah, I think I don't see it stopping anytime soon.
Yeah.
And I also think, like, if you look at the iPhone, right, which is probably like the last big shift, probably I feel I saw during my generation, it was still driven by like Apple managed the hardware and Apple created the SDK and Apple added the sensors that they wanted, right? And so they kind of dictated what was possible, and like they were putting the constraints. Now there's no constraints anymore, right?
So it's closer to the internet.
It's closer to the internet. Distribution is incredible, right?
Where famously a lot of people thought they were late, right? And then almost all the big companies that are around today have been created 10 or 15 years ago, when they all thought they were way too late.
And same thing with the iPhone, right? If you look at like the big winners like Uber, Airbnb, like they were not created in 2008, right? They came quite a lot later.
Yeah.
So Shopify, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, one of the I think we haven't even like began to scratch the surface. I mean, one of the things that blew my mind the other day, I forgot by whom the demo was. It might have been by Google, but I might be misremembering. But you know how now visual generation, right, and video generation gets so fast that basically there was a demo where a user interface was generated on the fly, right? And that's a completely blew my mind, because obviously we think of user interfaces as relatively static, but that this actually could be one day so fast that it will be generated on the fly just for you. I mean, you can sort of start to think about what that all means, right? That like we're still stuck in the old world and we're using those tools, right? I mean, in good productive ways, but the way things will change will just be so profound that it's just very early days, I think.
Yeah, I agreed. And I mean, we do talk about it as well internally, right? Which is, you know, every single user will want to use their app, like their email app, in a slightly different way. Should we have a chat box and you just tell it and we just recode your, you know, your email product? So you don't need to, you're not going to, you can choose, you can create your own features, right? And your way of dealing with email is very different than mine, very different than someone else. And everyone could be kind of creating, morphing their own, or forking, I don't know what's the right thing, right? Like you build a base product and everyone is like customizing it and building it for themselves. I think that's a very exciting future. There's going to be a lot of frameworks that need to be built and tech to like track all of the changes and making sure things work. But I think right now, I don't think the technology is the limiting factor. I think it's user adoption that is the limiting factor. Because you and I, every single time we see a tweet, like, you know, very often I'm on my phone and I'm like, oh, I need to get my computer to go and test this thing, right? That's my nature. But I see other, like whenever we're going to enterprises, they don't care, right? Like software is not exciting. It's yet another tool that the company is like asking us to use. And so the adoption is still very, very slow out there. So I think it's day zero in terms of like, you know, worldwide adoption of all of these tools.
So that's also an interesting thing, right? Where I think we just don't have a historic parallel to fall back on. Like what happens when the gap between what is technologically possible and the speed of adoption just becomes too large? I mean, of course, one could argue, well, what happens is just that the market will collapse, right? Because yeah, you can build it, but no one will buy it. So, but there's also this possibility that many other weird things will actually happen that we haven't even thought of yet. And it's kind of mind-boggling.
I think that scenario is very likely, and it's hard to sleep at night, which is thinking of what are all the different possibilities, and and where do you play, right? Like, it's because you can innovate at an incredible pace, but you just need to make sure that people can adopt. So it's super interesting times.
Definitely very interesting. So thanks very much. If people want to find out more about you or Maestro Labs, where should they go?
Yeah, so they can visit our website, which is maestrolabs.com. They can reach out to me on LinkedIn as well, and happy to engage in any type of conversation with entrepreneurs, with enterprises that are looking at adopting AI, or researchers that would love to collaborate.
Amazing. Thanks so much, Adrian.
Thank you, Marcel.